Thanks for coming in for the Lunch and Learn. Sorry it was taking a little longer to get the food together. That's always my adventure in cooking. Say it, it'll work like this. Yeah, it doesn't work. But that's the adventure. That's the fun. You just have to look at it from that creativeness and fun and not be worried about it. You know, as long as you did, well, even if you set the smoke alarm off, put the fire out with the pan on top, or get it back in the sink and open a window. But today, it's the 4th Tuesday of March. It's Diabetes Alert Day. A few years ago, there was a nice campaign, and it was a little finger with a blood thing, and it was Stop Diabetes. And it's ways of recognizing that there is a spell of time where numbers are higher than they should be, but not high enough that we call it diabetes. And they found that if we are in that group that the numbers are a little bit higher than they should be, if we make some lifestyle changes, and not drastic ones either, they found that that prevents type 2 diabetes from showing up in some people. So if you're in pre-diabetes, about half the people that have that blood sugar a little at between 100 and 1 to 125 for a fasting blood sugar, half of them with making a few lifestyle changes don't go the rest of the way to diabetes. You maybe always are on that little cusp of an edge, but you always want to just be careful of those things. And one of the challenges we face is there's a lot of things for our health that get in the way or start making the long-term diseases show up. You know, so a lot of times you're going to get asked, what about sleep? Sleep is one of the newest things that we figured out, that being exhausted, you are more impaired than if you're drunk. There's enough studies that are like, when you are just totally exhausted and not having enough sleep, you can't function well. And your body's always fighting because it's expecting to have a chunk of time to recharge your battery. And, you know, some night shift people can handle it because they're easy to go to sleep and they can sleep whenever they need to. Some people find that they're falling asleep no matter what they're doing, even if they slept good all night. You know, and as we age, our breathing might change, the mechanics in here might change, so don't be surprised if you get that questionnaire about how likely are you to fall asleep sitting at the red light in your car. Or if you sit down to read a book, how fast do you fall asleep? Those are clues that maybe there's something going on. Maybe it is truly you were up all night taking care of someone who was sick or worried, and you're falling asleep because you are exhausted and your body's trying to catch up. But, you know, those are the kind of things that we're learning, that sleep and not sleeping well and not getting our really 8 to 9 hours of sleep. We can get by on 4 or 5, but we're really short in the battery, so it's not going to last us as long. A lot of our general health things, we try to find them before you're sick with them. So once again, that's why if your doctor hasn't done a blood sugar check for a while or done your blood chemistries, let's look and see if there's a challenge before you've got the problems from it. That's the same way why we always do cholesterol, which is how prediabetes kind of gets lost a little bit in the shuffle, because we fast 14 hours for that cholesterol. You know, so sometimes after 14 hours of no gas in your gas tank, your numbers will be pretty good. And then we go celebrate that we fasted for 14 hours. You know, phew, we made it. Let's go eat. And if we looked at your blood sugar more like in the afternoon, we maybe would find our prediabetes a little bit earlier. What we're able to do physical activity-wise, you know, that's another big key piece. As we get older, as our work schedules get crazier, we don't have the stamina or the interest, or, you know, we all just got used to doing what we wanted in our own home for the last 3 years. And it's a little harder now to take that step out and go, let's go back to some of those interaction things. You know, and another big key piece of it, which I don't think it's on there. Oh, yes it is. Support. You know, even if you don't know anybody else working out or walking on the treadmill, if you always come out at the same time, you and that other person start to go, hey, she's here again. Look at her, she's doing the best she can. You know, sometimes it's a little scary to do a group class because I'm not coordinated at all. It takes a while. But you know, don't hurt yourself. If you can only do one step and everybody in the group did 5, that's okay. You did your 1 step. You know, 2 or 3 weeks from now, you'll be getting 2 steps into their 5. You know, it takes a while. A few years ago, we had like Leslie Sansom in walking, and we had 2 days a week we had walking, and 2 days a week we had kind of like cardio stuff, all in our little education building that's now under some wonderful, oh no, it's a parking lot now. And I couldn't keep up with the class myself. Until about a year later, I could make it through half the class. Before I was getting too tired and too confused of like, oh wait, you said to go this way and I went that way. It's okay. Really, it's okay. But it's getting support. You know, it's having the walking buddy. It's having that someone that says, hey, I'm gonna go for a walk wherever, I'm leaving now. Hey, I should be done in about 2 hours. If you don't check back in, then we know where to go start looking to make sure you're safe. So anytime you do activities that are new, or trying food that's new, or stress things, they all work together to help with your chronic diseases. So with prediabetes, what's happening is our body needs insulin to open the door on the cells, so the sugar from when we eat our food, it turns into sugar, it turns into some amino acids, it turns into some fat and vitamins and minerals and water, all so that the body cells can use it. And the only way for that glucose to get in your cell is if your insulin opens the door. And so it kind of sounds simple, but you know, there's a hormone in your gut when we eat food that gets turned on when food gets there, tells the pancreas, hey guys that make insulin, get on the assembly line and go to work. You know, so do we still have those cells that can answer those calls? And that's where some of the prediabetes starts to show up. You know, maybe your body's making the perfect amount of insulin if everything else in life was perfect. But guess what? It's not perfect for very long, is it? So we just have to keep rolling with the punches and at least be aware of what's going on. Sometimes the problem is inside the cell. It doesn't talk to the insulin. And sometimes the problem is just the system's just not working the way it's supposed to. And that's where blood sugars start to sneak up. Or it takes the body longer to make the insulin and longer for the cell to talk and use it. So that's where the prediabetes, the newest statistics say 1 in 3 people, American adults, have prediabetes. 84% of us don't know it. And the same way with type 2 diabetes, that's the 90%, and we're at like, I want to say 12 million, but I think we're more at 12 million people. But out of those 12 million, about a third to a half don't realize their blood sugars aren't safe. So there's a quick little test, check-in for prediabetes. Could you have it? And of course, age is a piece of it. You think about it, the longer we have lived, the longer our body has made do with whatever we can hand it. And at some point, it gets tired. Kind of think of our little pancreas as like the washcloth when we're doing dishes. When you first pull it out, it's pouring all the insulin we need. Life starts wringing it out and it starts slowing down. So unfortunately, the older we are, the more points we get towards having prediabetes. If we're a man or a woman, the guy gets the 1 extra point there. If you're a woman but have been diagnosed with gestational diabetes, then we get a point there, because that gestational diabetes is when your body couldn't keep up with the stress of maintaining everything with pregnancy. So that lets us know that maybe down the road, your body's going to have trouble just managing general life. So that's why we worry about that. Some of the older questionnaires would say if you had a baby that was over 9 pounds, because a lot of times we didn't tell you you had gestational, or you didn't know. You know, you were fine the day you tested, and 2 weeks later it showed up. And we're not looking then because your test came out okay. If you're physically active, that's a big point. You know, that's a big piece of this. And I don't mean knocking yourself out and running marathons, unless that's what you like to do. It's just moving more, finding a different way to add some activities that are more than what you're used to. If you have high blood pressure, you get a point for that. And that's because the blood sugar, heart health and diabetes health and kidney health and eyes and nerves all go together. You know, we can't just talk about one piece of the puzzle. Family. Now, this is not a guarantee either, but chances are higher that if you've got relatives that have diabetes or prediabetes, you may be predisposed to it. And then it goes to our weight category. And that's what's on this other page here. So I will share. I am the 5'4" still. I haven't started shrinking yet. But oh boy, that I'm not there. I'm in this zone. I am actually right in the middle of that zone, doggone it all. So I get 2 extra points to my risk for prediabetes. And once again, weight is not the only determinant of this, and I know it gets so much press. Oh my goodness, you're like bombarded with BMI and weight for everything. You can be thin and eat the healthiest you can eat and be physically active and still get prediabetes. And that's where the danger kind of comes in, because we're so used to, oh, you have to be heavy to get this. No, it's when your system wears out, it's going to show up. Okay? And that's, you know, that's really the big thing too. It's like, it's not your fault, you know? And that's the other hard part, is we kind of try to blame everybody, but it's just, the system's getting tired. So how we diagnose it, so if you ended up with 5 points or more, you know, with all of this weights and each one of these where you got a point, like, I'm not 60 yet, but I get 2 points over there for how old am I, and I got 2 points for my weight, and didn't have gestational. I'm not as physically active as I would like to be, but everything else on this page is okay. But I got my 5 points already. So I know to be careful and watch my A1C with my workplace wellness every year, because fasting blood sugars between 120 and 125. So that fasting is nothing to eat or drink for at least 8 hours. I know the lab lets you have water and maybe plain coffee with nothing, but that's okay. The other one we might use is the oral glucose tolerance test. And that one, we kind of look, what is your blood sugar now? We give you this lovely stuff to drink that everyone swears I would never drink that much sweet syrupy stuff. And it's 75 grams of carbs. So if you drink a Mountain Dew, that's like a 16 ouncer, you just had 75 grams of carbs. You know, if you had a cup and a half of pasta on your plate, that's 75 grams of carbs, because a whole cup of pasta is 45, and another 15 gives me that 60, 75, okay. A cup and 2/3, you know. So we get that much carb, but not always in that liquid. And the reason it's that syruply sweet, and if you had that during pregnancy, that glucose tolerance test, we're forcing the system to see will it respond. So, you know, that's one of those quirks of the test. But you don't eat or drink for the 8 hours. Sometimes they do a fasting and sometimes they don't. And then they give you the stuff to drink. So don't walk around, don't drink or eat anything in those 2 hours. And then when they check your blood sugar again, in pre-diabetes, you're gonna be in between that 140 and 199. If you had diabetes, you'd be 200 or higher. And that's where we can diagnose from. A1C is how soaked in sugar your red blood cells are over a 2 to 3 month period. So it's weird because everything else is a straight number and A1C is a percent, because you're kind of looking at or thinking about how much extra sugar is stuck on my red blood cells. And that's why it's a percentage. We want you to be as close to normal as we can get you. It's one of those things we use as kind of a guide of what's the 3 month big picture. It doesn't tell you the day-to-day. It doesn't tell you how much time you may spend okay and safe. And it doesn't tell us how much is maybe too high or too low. That's where some other tools that we have that we use to help keep you safe. But pre-diabetes starts way down here at 5.7 and goes up to 6.4, 6.5 and up is diabetes. And it's not that this is bad, and it's not a judgment, it's just a tool. Okay, how am I doing? Now sometimes, you know, you get your blood work done, and the fasting plasma one is usually in your chemistry. A1C they may do once a year or once every 3 years, depending on your history and what your other health stuff you got. But with the glucose, like say one time you came in at 100 and 6 months later you're getting a checkup and you've got blood work and your fasting went up to, we'll say 110. It's still in the good zone, so your doc might say you were good. But if say when you were 101, you changed something, you know, maybe it was like getting into that icy cold bitter stuff and you know, you had the blood work before when we could still get out and now we had like 3 or 4 months of not getting out, it'd be great for you to know that that change in activity bumped your numbers up that little bit. You know, so that's where sometimes you know you bled red and green for that blood work and the insurance premium. Get the numbers. You know, get the numbers. Use the My Chart. If you don't use My Chart, have somebody print them for you. Or if you've got pre-diabetes concern, come see me. We can work on something together. I can print you some. We can look at it together because you want to look at the big picture. You know, do you kind of have an ebb and flow? Are you pretty steady all the time? Because it changes by activity, by food, by stress, by illness. It will all change. One of the best things we can do for any of our chronic diseases between heart attack, stroke, diabetes, kidney disease, because it's also Kidney Disease Awareness Month as well. I think COPD is lungs are in November too. Quit smoking if you smoke. There's lots of tips, there's lots of tricks, there's a few places that offer quitting for free. But it's one of the most important things we can do for our health. And if you don't smoke, don't start. And if you're vaping, start working on cutting that back too. There's lots of ways to do it. If you slip and have one, it's a slip, not a fail. You just get back on that horse and say, okay, back to the drawing board. Let's quit again. Getting active. This is the hardest thing. Even if we were starting insulin today for diabetes, the hardest thing I'm going to ask anybody to do is be a little more active than what you're usually doing. It's the hardest thing to niche in. And the minute we lose that little notch of what we were doing, it's so hard to get it back. It's so easy to say, I'll walk tomorrow. You know, the weather was lousy yesterday. Let's park closer to the door. But that was okay because that was lousy weather yesterday. Like getting at least 2.5 hours of physical activity in a week. So that breaks down to like 30 minutes above and beyond what you do. You know, so if you're on your feet all day at work, your body says, that's the same old thing you do every day. So it's, what can I do to make that harder? Or a lot of times our jobs are this and that. You know, it's short distance, stop, go, stop, go. The grocery store. Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, that was a better idea over there. Oh, I forgot this. You know, you do a lot of back and forth, but it's not a lot of go. So the idea for health is how long can we go before the body says, hey, could you give us a break and sit for a minute? Because, you know, if you don't have good circulation to the legs and we're not used to them, they'll get tired. So that's what we, you know, sit down, take a break, get your breath, walk some more. It's the best tool we have. It's the cheapest tool we have. Another thing is muscle training. Ben was really great telling us how we lose muscle after age 30. Oh, wow, I didn't realize how much we lose. When we lose muscle, there's nowhere to put the extra sugar. So strength training, you know, okay, these bags are heavy. Let me do a few arm curls before I put them on the shelf. Yeah, maybe grocery shopping day is not the way to make a change in your activity. That day is usually okay. You know, all the stores that we've got anymore are just too stinking big. And then you've got 25 little bags. Or I try to use my reusables, but they're usually in the house with the groceries from the last time. That's life, it's life. But pick one thing to change. Or one thing to monitor first. You know, sometimes we're so used to like, we got to throw everything out in the bathwater too, that we forget that maybe there's things that are already okay. Okay, so if you've already got a really great cardio routine and a relaxation routine, fine, celebrate that you've got those two parts of the puzzle. And maybe that's fine, and the next piece would be maybe adding something new. We're getting to that time of the year where we could go to different parks and check out all the new things that we have in the metro parks. If you haven't cycled in a long time, start stationary and slow, because my knees are still mad at me from trying to ride a bike with my daughter like 20 years ago. I'm still traumatized by having to walk the stupid bike around the rest of the block instead of pedal it. That's what I get for using my high school bike that didn't have all the fun bells and whistles. But there's all kinds of neat activities to do. There's even sometimes not, if you go like to nature walk or when they do like the bird stuff, you know, or tree things out in the garden. It's going to be time to go around and see what plant grew back this year. And then healthy eating. That's our other next hardest thing. And it's hard because we always want to throw it all out. You got a lot of meals that already work just fine. You really do. And sometimes some meals need a little more vegetable. Maybe they need a little more meat. And it's harder sometimes as we get older. The meat doesn't always work out so well. But roasting, broiling, grilling, when you're buying food, like our little packs of chicken that were only a pound, I live alone. So I would be packing all of those in Ziplocs and freezing them. Or maybe I grilled some on the grill near the end of last fall and then Ziplocked them and froze them so that I could have grilled chicken without the grill in the middle of the winter. Always kind of think of, especially if you're cooking for one or two, think about night right now and then maybe tomorrow and one for the freezer. So now you've got your own TV dinner without buying a TV dinner. But there's our idea with the food now. We kind of want more non-starchy veggies. And the reason this is important is the non-starchy veggies, they have a little carb, but they have more fiber and some other vitamins, and they don't turn to carbohydrate. The carbohydrate in them doesn't turn to sugar as quickly as our carb foods or our starchy foods, but they are still a big important part of the puzzle too, but we only want about 1/4 of the plate there, if we can. And the other 1/4 would be your protein, you know, and we're kind of looking for proteins to be about the size of that deck of cards, or the size of the palm of your hands. And if you've got 3 ounces of protein, you've got 7 times 3, 21 grams of protein. The carb foods tend to have some protein in them too. Not a lot, 1 or 2 grams in the serving. And non-starchy veggies have a little bit of protein too. So if the protein is the one thing that we start to not eat enough of, and this carb side is easy, fast, easy, and go. And sometimes it's hard to throw the non-starchy veggies on the plate. And then we've changed this up to being, instead of a glass of milk, making it a low calorie so that you eat your calories, eat your carbs, eat your protein. Don't drink them. Because when you drink them, your body sucks it up like a sponge, and then your stomach's left empty. You know, it's just down and up and away it goes. Sometimes you have to drink the proteins, you know, sometimes you need those meal replacement ideas, and that's perfectly fine but sometimes it becomes a habit to go, I'm just going to drink this, and it's okay. Just make sure your body works with it okay. So you've got the ingredient list. You always want to know what the serving size is. And then if we're watching for fat, if we have high cholesterol, or not high cholesterol, but the total lipid panel, if your total cholesterol and the LDL and the HDL and the triglycerides are high, we're going to watch out for the total fat. Blood pressure, swelling, general health, we got to be careful about the sodium. And that's the salt part of it. And then diabetes-wise, we want to look at this line right there, the total carbs. And this is why. If I only looked at sugar, it says 1 gram. And if I had 1 slice of whatever this is, and I thought I only had 1 gram of sugar, my body's really got 21 grams to deal with, because other things than sugar out of the sugar bowl is in there. And this is telling me that out of that 1, this was all somebody else's taste buds. So like when you get to watch the cooking show, it's like we were shaking. Oh, let's add a little bit more. That's what this added sugar means. It's what did somebody else add above and beyond what was already in it. Fiber is great. You know, your breads, your cereals, your crackers, you want fiber in them. That's the whole point of them. Fruit will all have fiber in them too. And if this was a piece of fruit, the total sugar may be a lot higher because it's sugar, it's fruit, but remember, it still counts. It doesn't matter if it's natural, it still counts in your total for the whole picture. The new labels now have your vitamin D and how much potassium is in here. Iron and calcium were always on that label. The other thing, they're mandating trans fats being listed with the saturated. So saturated was always mandated, and then anything else they gave us was a bonus. But all of this information is only for that serving size. So if I ate the entire container by the end of the week or the end of a couple of days, I get to multiply everything by 14. Lots of times we forget that this is only for whatever that serving was. Okay? The other thing that's really nice and important to look at is that ingredient list. You know, what is in that thing that you're eating, and how fast do you need a dictionary? So we're trying to go back towards that 9-inch plate that we had in the 50s, not our 12-inch plates that don't even fit in the dishwasher without some jockeying. When you can, use the measuring cups. You know, dry ones, liquid. And the teaspoon and tablespoon is not the one that's in your drawer. It's the actual cooking one, because it's very different. And some people will weigh their foods. So if you're weighing, if I had whatever this 2 rounded scoops was, I would want the scale to go to 46 grams to be. That's what this number up here is. And that's where it gets kind of weird, because we talk about grams of this and grams of that. And this one at the top is if you put it on a scale to weigh it. The grams for carbohydrates were way down here, whatever this was. But there's my sodium right there. And once in a while, something's going to have a little more sodium, but then the next thing isn't going to have a lot. So it's, what's the total at this meal? And then the weight will manage itself when we manage the plate and the activity. But just losing 5 to 7% of your starting body weight, they found, was enough to prevent type 2 diabetes. And a lot of times if you're on blood pressure medicine or diabetes medicines, even losing 5 or 7, 5 to 10 pounds is enough to change medications. Now that being said, when we get in the summer, when we're more physically active, make sure that you're working with your doctor, make sure you're safe. And then when winter comes, some people do. Some people have the winter doses and some people have summer doses, because our activity is so different up here. So just a recap. And then there were some handouts out in the back. There were 20 health tip things. There was eating right on a budget tips and smart tips for successful meals that I found at the, this year, since March is also Nutrition Month, and this year's they were doing Fuel for the Future, and they had a whole bunch of fun things, tip sheet wise. There's a lot more than what I have up there, and I gave you some puzzles because I thought that's a nice little icebreaker, because how many times do you take a chance to go, I'm going to do the crossword, or I'm going to do the word search? And I don't know about you, but sometimes I like one kind better than the other. So I thought that would be a kind of fun little icebreaker, or a fun little, let's take 5 minutes and de-stress. Then my association, the Diabetes Care and Education Specialist Group, had a neat little thing for like shopping tips. So focus on your fresh fruits, vegetables, proteins, and dairy. Stay fuller longer with the whole grains, and that's why when we do the grain group, we're looking for the whole grains, the more denser foods. Have your list ready before you go to the store, and don't go when you're hungry. And I'd also say don't go shopping when you're mad. Don't go when you're sad or too excited, because I don't know about you, but there are some days when I'm good and tired and down, I'm picking a few other things off my list. Or if I'm too excited, I'm kind of like, oh, it looks good and that looks good. And the next thing I know, it's becoming the science experiment in the back of the refrigerator, which that's hard, because if you're trying to just buy small, because one of the tips in a lot of the things for budgeting with your food is like buy one, get one. Well, sometimes I'm never going to finish that whole first one in the time. So if it's buy one, get one free, you could always donate that other one to the food pantry, or get the one next to it that's cheaper and it's what you're going to use. So once in a while, what's on the coupon is not cheaper because it's a bigger box. Make a list and stick to it. Discount cards, a lot of them have those programs, and they do add up a lot. store brands are sometimes lower in cost. And bulk buying if you can, but make sure to watch the shelf life, because once in a while those buy one, get one frees are already kind of iffy. Another neat thing that we have in the county is there's a thing called produce giveaway, and it's free. It doesn't go by your income. It's kind of a grab bag of what are they giving us, but it's a way to get some vegetables, get some produce for free, and then go shopping, because then that helps your food dollars stretch longer. And planning, and as many steps ahead as you can do to make life easier. And if you have a goal or set a goal, even if it's just one little thing, let's make sure to do one thing that we can pat ourselves on the back in a week or 2 weeks to say, hey, I got this. Okay, sometimes we do a big lofty goal and it takes a year or two to get there, and it gets hard to stick with it. I'm at the end of my list. Woohoo, check that out. And it's still today. I'm being so bad with time. I didn't even take half my toys out. You guys are blessed here. But do you guys have any questions? I covered a lot of stuff kind of fast.
When you look good on the nutrition label, my son is a diabetic.
Yeah.
And he was saying, he was told to take the carbs and deduct the fiber from them.
Is he dosing insulin based on the carbs he's eating at the time?
He's not doing insulin, I think he's taking medication.
Yeah, and you can find this in a lot of places. A lot of the ultra low carb, no carb eating styles, eating patterns, have you take out every drop of fiber out of the carb. But see, out of this fiber, I don't know if all of that is going to not add any sugar or if it's digestible fiber and it will add some sugar. So we usually say in the diabetes world, if that's 5 grams or more in a serving, which, you know, if you find things that are 5, let me know, because it's very hard to find something that the serving is 5 grams of fiber. You can take half of it out. So I don't know, at 5, to me, it's not worth taking out 2.5.
No.
Now, if I'm eating something that managed to get a plate that was 60 grams of carbs and 10 of them were fiber, yes, if I'm dosing my insulin based on this food, I do need to account for that fiber. Because if I take my insulin for 60 grams of carbs, but my body only gets 50, I just sunk my ship for later in the day because I didn't match my insulin to my food. But I know a couple of eating styles, they take out every drop in quite a few years ago, I'm going through the for sale candy at the end of the season of Easter. And one of the bags of candy was so proud of itself and it said net carb, whatever. I went, you are chocolate. How can you have a net carb? I have no idea where they got 1 gram of fiber because that was the only big difference. You know, there was like somehow 1 gram of fiber in that chocolate serving size. But, you know, you can do that. And it is a thing with some people. And that's kind of, I've learned to take the deep breath and step back and listen to the rest of the story because that's a way to get the carbs that you need to live without going, oh, that's a carb, I have to have that. Because we demonize the word carb so badly. And it's the gas in your gas tank. Even if you didn't eat carbs at all, your body is still breaking down the proteins into carbs to get the glucose so that your brain works. So that's the bigger picture of the whole thing. But yeah, that is weird and it's a little scary, but if he's safe with it,
That's what he was taught. He worked with somebody.
Yeah.
And he would look at that and say, well, that's the net carbs are 17.
Right. And that it depends on which school of thought you're in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I learned that it's half of what's there. And the other one you'll run across every so often too is some labels will list the artificial sweeteners or the sugar alcohols. Because sugar alcohols have just a little bit of carb, but they are made in such a way that your tongue goes, hey, that tasted pretty good. half a bag or 4 or 5 pieces later, depends on how sensitive your stomach
Right.
is,
Yeah.
your body goes, what is this junk, and let's get rid of it. So sometimes all it takes is smelling it. When you open the bag for some people it's a half a bag later and they want to blame their metformin for being sick, but it's because they have diabetes and they went, oh, sugar-free candy I can have all I want. But guess what? Sugar-free candy is still going to tell you 4 pieces is 15 grams of carbs. Sugar-free and diet don't mean free carbs. You know, it's just mean look at it and check the label. A lot of times the sugar-free version will lose some fiber and get more salt and fat. So once in a while, it's take a look at what you're getting. But yeah, there is a thing, and you run across it where they'll take all of that out and call it a net carb. And you can take out, once again, like the sugar alcohol. But if you are not dosing insulin on this moment right here, you're making it harder than it has to be. Because somewhere in the day, that apple that you thought's 4 ounces is going to be 4.5. So it'll equal out at the end of the day. You know, one day maybe is really great on the meal plan, the next day is kind of like a rough day, and you're just like, oh, I gotta eat. The checkbook will balance by the end of the week, so we're okay. It's if we're matching insulin, or there's a couple of meds that increase your body's production of insulin, that are kind of like the cheerleader that say, come on, have some. That's where we could get in trouble as well. Did that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's fun with the labels. The other fun thing to remember on the labels is that this might be 21.9, and all of us would call it 22, but they're allowed to call it 21. So once in a while when you're looking on things like Calorie King or the MyFitnessPal or some of the Lose It, those apps that you can type in the food or barcode scan it and it says, okay, how many servings did you have? You'll be like, wait, 2 of those should have been 42, and it might tell you that it's 43 or 45. So that's where that little disconnect comes in.
They could do that.
Yeah, I was like, you're kidding me. That's rough enough. But you know, this is best estimates. You know. Any other questions? Any other tips or tools you'd like? Take home some chicken. Take home some potatoes.
Where are the cookies?
You know, if you're interested in more diabetes eating patterns, well, it is not diabetes diet, it's just being more aware of that balance on your plate. The American Diabetes Association has a new program that I just got a little email blurb about it. And you sign up and it's like 6 or 8 weeks of online little session about what can I eat, how can I make better choices, what can I shop with, and it sounds kind of neat. So I was thinking that looks interesting, and they have a recipe site where you type in the food that you want, and it'll tell you nutrition information or a bunch of recipes. There was a recipe for peanut butter cookies that was stevia, peanut butter, an egg, and one other thing, but it wasn't flour. It was like a no flour thing. I was like, that's interesting.
Maybe oatmeal.
No, there was no oatmeal. It was gluten-free and dairy-free. Maybe a little salt, and I was like, why did you put salt in? And I was looking at the recipe going, I'm not going to put that much sugar in there. But yeah, and a cookie works. You know, if you've got a cookie and it tells you what it is, you give up what's on that plate to make up for that cookie. You know, just don't eat the whole tube. That's where crackers get us into trouble.
Yes.
You know, we go, oh, it's tiny. That little tube, like I only try to buy those Ritzes in the little thing because it never fails. The long tube, I'm going to get through the bottom of that tube. So this way I know they're fresh and I will stop hopefully by the second one. But there are more carbs in those 6 to 10 crackers than there are if you made a sandwich with 2 slices of bread. You know, even like deli meat, you know, the sub sandwich, those bigger buns, more carbs there. Make it on bread. But flatbreads can sometimes be as many carbs as a bun. So just be careful what the numbers are. And that's why if you didn't make it at home, you got a label to look at. you made it at home, go to a few recipe sites and type in your favorite secret recipe, and it'll help you estimate. It's kind of like if you make your pizza at home. Well, maybe it's somewhere between Domino's and Pizza Hut.
Make it my own pizza.
Exactly.